All right, folks, next set of monarchs to look at are going to be the Romanovs, the Russians, the czars of the Romanov dynasty. Now, if you look at the years, 1613 and 1917, 304 years of control by one family. Okay, it's pretty remarkable how much control the Romanovs had and what it brought Russia into, and eventually, again, the demise that's going to happen with Russia in 1917. The Romanov family is going to stop abruptly due to assassination. And again, it's with the times. When we look at World War I and the Russian Revolution, it'll make more sense. But understand, with the Romanov dynasty, we're moving now into, again, one family in control for 304 years. Okay? So they took over Russia, and the first thing they're going to do, like we've seen from the Spanish, like we've seen from the French, is they're going to centralize government. And once you centralize government, put all the control within the centralized part, and take it away from the nobles, in this case the boyars of Russia, then you really start to see a massive movement in the absolute monarchs and how the country will kind of go forward in a lot of ways. So it strengthens Russian government because of it. And the Tsar we need to focus on is Tsar Peter the First, or Peter the Great. Okay. Now notice the term Tsar, C-Z-A-R. It looks like Caesar. The same idea. It's the idea of a Caesar or an all-powerful leader. In Russia, they spelled it T-S-A-R. That's the Russian Cyrillic. If you look at Peter the Great, Peter stands almost 7 foot tall. He's a massive man. You can tell he's into the military. He's got a cannon here, his sword, his uniform. The head of the Russian Orthodox Church is going to be the Tsar, hence the crown with the cross in the middle here. You can see the cross on the top of his crown. And then he's got a map, because what Peter's going to do is he's going to modernize Russia very, very instantaneously and very, very well. And the other thing you got to really notice about Peter here, too, is he's not wearing a beard. Beards were very common in Russia at this time, and it was amongst their nobility. He would have had me cut it off, okay? And hence the reason why he does not have a beard in his painting. All right, so understand about Russia. Russia is cut off from what's going on in Western Europe because of the Mongolian rule. The Mongols had been there and been forcing the Russians in places like Kiev and Moscow to pay tribute to them. And really, nobody really wanted to deal with the Mongols, and the Russians were kind of stuck with them. So Western Europe was doing its thing and advancing forward, and Russia was really behind the times and will be that way even into the 1980s. But Russia's cut off from the Renaissance, and what Peter the Great's going to do is he's going to try to pull Russia into a much more modern age. Okay? So you still have nobility, you still have the serfdom, it's still kind of like a feudal system that's going on in Russia. The nobility are gaining control and have control of the land, the serfs are working the land, and they're completely and utterly abused, and even Peter's going to abuse the serfs. I mean, they're forced to conscribe into war, they're forced to do all the work. When he builds the city of St. Petersburg, they are doing everything. They don't have many rights here in Russia, but it does strengthen the power of the Russian government. Okay, so they're just behind Western Europe, and that's kind of what I was getting at before. So what Peter's got to do is he's got to figure out how to bring Russia up to speed. What's going to modernize Russia and make it a powerful country on the likes of England, in the likes of France, in the likes of some other places that he had been in contact with, but not necessarily where Russia was, and he wanted to get to that point. So what he decides to do is he's going to take a trip for 18 months, and he's going to go on what is called the Grand Embassy. So go ahead and underline the Grand Embassy here. This Grand Embassy, he's going to spend 18 months in Western Europe learning Western ways. He's going to learn Western shipbuilding. He's going to learn Western dress, Western morals, Western ways of life. And his whole thing is to bring these Western ways of life and Western military ideas back to Russia and force it upon his people, because he wants to modernize what Russia is doing. So when he does that, it's kind of crazy. He goes amongst the... That was the end of the second period, by the way. He goes amongst these different nobles and different royalty of these different countries, and he learns how they live, and he's going to impress that upon his nobles because he wants complete control, and it's going to push Russia really into a much more modern day. All right, so he begins to westernize, and the first thing he's going to force them to do is dress differently, and that's a big change for the nobles. They're very much in traditional noble Russian dress. He wants to make it more westernized. The second thing, like I mentioned before, is the beards going to go. He's going to force them to cut their beards. And then the third thing, that's 2, that's 3, there we go. The third thing he's going to do is he's going to make the capital moved. For centuries, Moscow had been the capital of Russia, had been the main connecting point for the Russian people and the Russian nobles. He's going to move that away because what Peter really wants, because he loves shipbuilding, he loves having a navy, is he wants a freshwater port to trade in. So he's got to move the capital because Moscow's in the center of the country. He's got to have access to water, and he's going to build a new city. All right? And that new city he's going to build, ironically enough, is named after him, St. Petersburg. And it's going to be a port city. And what he's even going to do on top of it is he's going to build it facing west. And the whole idea of facing west is because he wants to modernize Russia, so it needs to face west. So it's named after him. He faces it to the place he wants it to be. Oh, and by the way, it's on a swamp land. So he has to get rid of all that water. Of course, it's Russia, so it's in the wintertime too, to build his city. And it's going to be his modern city. It's going to be his grand accomplishment in how he strengthens Russian rule. And there is the city of St. Petersburg that leads to the freshwater port. And you can see it's very much like what you saw with Versailles and its building structures here. And of course, the main governmental buildings that will be in St. Petersburg. Right along the waterways, and it's essentially a Venice-type like city where you have different waterways leading in, but of course it has roads instead of canals. But it's definitely has access to the freshwater ports, and that's going to push Russia forward to become a very strong, independent country. And the Romanovs are really going to have a lot of control over Eastern Europe for a long time, leading up until World War I. Okay, so I just mentioned that he's built on swampland. Thousands of serfs are going to build a city. It's going to be over 100,000 serfs are going to build the city. So he really wants to modernize it, going back to what I mentioned earlier about leaving Moscow and building a new home for trade, because he wants to deal with the water and not with land trade. It's too slow. All right, so he's going to have conflicts with Finland. He's going to have conflicts with Sweden to gain control of that land, but ultimately he's going to get himself a freshwater port. All right, last video we're going to do is going to be on England.